to continue this, I would like to introduce to the stage Dave Cousin, and I'm going to just read a little about him. Dave specializes in SEO strategy, technical and international SEO, and has been working in SEO and the digital marketing field for over 20 years, including working with many of the world's biggest brands. And currently, he works between the UK and Canada. He's a regular speaker and trainer, including at the Brighton SEO and other conferences. Dave always aims to use his passion for the topic to get people excited and make sure that his talks give people actions and insights that they can take away and make use of immediately. So please, with a resounding round of applause, I would like you to help me, introduce on stage Dave Cousin.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, let's wait for the first slide to come up. I'll introduce myself a little bit more while we're waiting. Oh, no, here we are. As mentioned, I've been working in SEO for over 20 years. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is how things get from just being up on the web to actually being in Google's database. That's the before bit, before you search. So you've actually got that index there of pages ready to become part of the search results. And also, Google's system for actually working out from what you search for, what is relevant within the index. And this has changed a lot over the 20 years I've been working in search. So we're going to talk about what actually happens now. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. There's a lot of information available online that's very out of date. Who here feels like they're very confident in exactly what every part of Google's system is and how it works and how it all fits together? Okay, good. I'd be very disappointed if everyone put their hands up. I'm like, okay, well, there's no point in me doing this now. Okay, let's start off with the basics. Let's make sure I point this in the right place. There we go. Right. So, basic stages are crawling, indexing, the ranking algorithm, and of course, your search and how that search gets interpreted. So, crawling. We've got a crawler, a bot, a robot, a spider, whatever we want to call it, which is basically trying to find as many pages as possible, as much content as possible that's got value to be shown to users. That then gets added to an index. Gone too far now. If pages are indexable and have useful content, they get added to that index. Then if we go across to the other end, when you search, isn't just your search term that's getting compared to what's in the index, it's getting expanded out, terms are getting weighted, and we're going to talk about all of this in a bit more detail. And then in the middle is the ranking algorithm that decides what order to put those relevant documents in. Now, we're going to go into a lot more detail on all of this, but what I want to say to begin with is we can influence all of these areas. And there's probably some of you who work on specific areas and have specific focuses, but as a team with everyone else you're working with, which includes other SEOs, technical SEOs, but also people like web developers and so on, you need to make sure that all of these four sections are working. A lot of the time when we talk about SEO, we split it into technical SEO, we split it into on-page, off-page, maybe local SEO. The reality is that we also need to think of it in terms of what it influences within this process. And by understanding today a little bit more about how this process works, hopefully that allows you to do a better job of prioritizing what you're actually working on. So I under crawlability. I'm not going to go through everything. This talk's not about how to actually do all of this stuff. But, when we're thinking about crawlability, we're thinking about making sure pages are discoverable, thinking about links, the site hierarchy, etc. Then in terms of indexability, of course, we need to make sure we're not blocking pages. We also need to make sure that it's not just the pages that are indexable, but the content as well. And that's sometimes where things fall down. Google, other search engines can find the pages, but they can't see the content on the pages. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Then in terms of ranking and position, obviously we know there's hundreds of factors, but really it comes down to having great content that matches the intent of the people searching at this point. And in terms of actually matching to what people are searching for, of course we do keyword research still. It's not about exact matching like it used to be, but it's understanding how people are searching, understanding the intent behind it, but also making sure we're localizing as well, because how people search in different countries as well as different languages impacts their intent, impacts what they're looking for. Okay, so let's start with the before bit. Before you click enter, before you make your search, there has to be that index of pages ready to be shown to you. And of course, search engines see code. We see, a live page. Google and other search engines try and interpret that page and try and understand how we as users see that, but sometimes they're going to miss things, and sometimes they're going to see things that we don't see. But they're looking at two bits of code, so it's important to understand there's the source code, which is basically the initial HTML file, and there's the initial DOM, the document object model, which is basically when the page first loads before anybody interacts with the page. And this is important because when the spiders go and start crawling a website, they start off, if it's a new website, they'll find the first page. Maybe they find an external link, etc. Or it might be they're returning to an existing page and maybe starting from the home page. And what they're going to do is they're then going to download the initial HTML file and see what links, what content is in that basic file. And at this point, they're not going to render it. They're not going to look at that initial document object model. So they're just seeing what's in that page to begin with. And they'll find more links. And they will then go and follow those to new pages. And for each page, they're going to find more links, and they're going to keep on crawling until they found every single page that they can find. Or the crawl budget has run out. So they'll spend a certain amount of time, a certain amount of data they're going to download, depending on how important they think the site is. And it's important to remember that fairly recently, Google have said that they're no longer focusing on downloading and indexing as many pages as possible. It's much more focused now on indexing valuable pages. So don't assume every single page you've got is going to be indexed, even if there's nothing blocking it from being indexed. Then a slightly different piece of software comes back and it's going to render the page. So at this point, it is going to run those scripts and it's going to try and replicate what we as users actually see when all the scripts and everything on the page runs. And at this point, you're potentially going to see more links, and so they'll go back and they'll check those links again, and then maybe they'll find some new pages. So that means that if you have links that are only shown on the page once the page renders, then it's going to delay actually finding those pages, particularly if you've got a new website set up. But eventually, Google will know what pages there are, what content is on those pages, and if there's valuable content, then it's going to get added to the index, assuming there's nothing like robots.txt or tags blocking that. So one thing to consider is if we have orphan pages with no links to them, or no links that search engines can actually see, they may never get indexed. They might do if they're in a sitemap or something, but of course they're not going to have much link equity. And if we've got a page like here, which is 9 clicks away from the home page, now, if all of those 9 links only show up once the page renders, and maybe there's a delay of maybe 1 to 2 days, then it's going to take maybe at least 9 days for that page to be found if it's a brand new site being indexed for the first time, potentially, and there's no sitemap. So Let's talk about JavaScript and CSS, mainly focusing on JavaScript, to be honest, which most websites use now. Back in the past, we didn't need to worry about it. Then some websites started using it, and Google couldn't cope with it at all. So that was a problem. Now, Google can mostly deal with it, but that means that sometimes people are overconfident with using JavaScript and other scripts because they assume that they're going to be read. So one problem is sometimes they're just too slow. Get split into the different interests of reading and some related terms there, astronomy, and then other terms added for context and understanding intent. Like I say, it's a simplified version, but just to give you some idea of what's actually happening before this even gets compared to what's in the index and what could be a good candidate document. At the same time, term weighting is going to happen. So not all parts of a search term are equal. If you search for Nike running shoes, which is actually an example that Google used when they launched term weighting BERT, which I'm not going to go into too much detail on today, but there's a talk that I did a little while ago, which I can share if anyone's interested in that. But basically what they're able to do now is understand which parts of the search are most important to you as the searcher. So this has got a little bit messed up here. The shoes is supposed to be over there in yellow. So just imagine it is. But Nikes are really important because you haven't just put Nike in by accident. You could have put, a different brand in, but you specified Nike. So that should be upweighted as an important term to match in candidate documents. Running shoes as well, the two words together, that gives a lot of extra context. So a page that mentions running shoes is highly relevant, so that can be upweighted. But just running on its own could be related, but not necessarily. And shoes on its own, again, is probably less relevant if it just matches shoes. So different parts of this get upweighted, as well as some of the expansion of them as well. It's going to get weighted when your search gets compared to what's actually in the document to bring back those candidate documents. So to use this search term as an example still, so before we had this weighting, we maybe would get back results like this. I don't know how well you can see them. We've got gift ideas for a kid who wants a telescope that's not sure what, but something there. And so they're not relevant, but they're not as relevant as when you add in term weighting, because before it's based on which pages match the most terms, now it's which ones match the most important terms or synonyms, etc. And so I think this is a much better results page, these first four results here. And by the way, if you're wondering where all the other search features are, I just cut those out just so we could just look at the traditional results. Okay, so then we get some candidate documents back. Now, back in 1998, if you search for books, you'd maybe get just under 15,000 results that mention books somewhere. And it really is just those pages that mention books. Now, if you search, you're getting maybe 15,280 million pages that are related to books. Now, not every single one's going to have the word books on, of course. So now it's expanded out. And of course, we've got something like 400 billion documents in that index. So you get a lot more results coming back, and this is in, less than half a second. It's incredible. And there's still, different parts of the ranking algorithm we haven't even looked at that happen within this half a second. So. Okay. So all of those 15,000 million results are going to come back with a score for how relevant they are to your search term. Now, we don't know exactly what this scoring looks like, but I've done an example here that's based on it being maybe out of 100. So back before Hummingbird, before we added synonyms, before we had term weighting, if you search for best phone for photos, page A here, the best phone for photo editing, is probably going to get a really good score. And page B here, top smartphones for photography lovers 2025, maybe a very low score, at least based on those titles. But now as humans, as users, we understand that actually, given the context, page B is much more relevant. And so now, the pages, get swapped around because of that extra context, because of that term weighting. So we're much more likely to see page B, which is much more likely to give us a good search experience and help to answer our questions. So at this point, we've got 15 million results potentially, 15,000 million results even, which have got an initial ranking based on those scores. And the up-weighted terms mean that if you've got more up-weighted terms, you're likely to have a higher score. So this is a starting point then for the rankings. And at this point, just based on relevance to your search term. And then the other ranking factors are basically going to get added on top of that. So now we move on to the actual ranking part, the actual algorithm. And a lot of the time when we talk about SEO, we focus a lot on the algorithm. So maybe you're expecting this to, a lot more of this to be talking about the algorithm, but we're only just getting onto this part. Now, what I'm not going to do is go through every single ranking factor and talk about every single one, but all these hundreds of ranking factors are going to get run as different processes. Now, a lot of them are part of the core algorithm. Some of them are separate sections. Some things are developed by Google and then added into the core algorithm later on. But it is a series of processes. It's not just one process that happens with all of those factors going in to change around the rankings. And after that main ranking algorithm has run and some other related processes, there's also going to be re-ranking based on things like context, based on location, based on also things like your search history. If you're logged in, you're going to get a very different result to if you're in incognito mode, because Google and other search engines have a good idea who you are, what kind of things you search for, what's most likely to be relevant to you. And different factors are going to be weighted differently by context in the initial algorithm. So for some topics, maybe first-person real-world experience is really important, the first E in EEAT. Whereas for things like health and finance, we know that expertise are up-weighted. Sometimes you want fresh information, sometimes you want a piece of content that's very well established with lots of links. Sometimes it's more authority, sometimes more trust. Sometimes you want a really detailed article to read through and really understand a lot about a topic. Other cases, you just want clarity, you just want a clear answer. And sometimes you want something that's hyper local, like where's the closest bank that's open now? Other cases, it might be that you want something that's, at least in your country. So if you want to buy something online, you want to make sure they at least deliver to your country. And some searches, location's less important. So all of these factors, the weighting for them depends on context. That's important to remember. So what you're optimizing, if you understand the context, will inform what you focus on. So, for example, whether you create content that uses more user-generated content or uses more experts, for example. Okay, so at this point, all of our traditional blue link results are put into order. We still have to add in the additional SERPs features. And so there's different processes to add these in. But again, what gets added depends very much on context. I have a feeling that the animation on this slide isn't going to work, unfortunately. But what we have here is a search for how to eat a durian fruit. So this really is well suited to AI overviews. We've got a step-by-step guide there as the AI overview. Let's see if the animation works. If it was working, we'd be scrolling down the page. No, it didn't work. But we'd be scrolling down the page and we'd be seeing there's things like there's a feature snippet, there's photos, there's videos, there's people also ask, there's people also search for, which you can see here. So it very much depends on the context of what people are looking for. Whereas if somebody searches Kyogo, about the Japanese footballer, we're getting different results. No AI overview here. We've got photos, we've got stats, we've got videos, top stories, news stories. We've got a knowledge graph there. Got people also ask, people also search for, and there's some videos. So it's going to depend a lot on the context, but also on availability. So don't assume because you look at a search engine results page and there is no featured snippet or there is no AI overview, that Google don't want to show that. It might just be that they don't have a good source for that. And you could be that source and potentially get that visibility, especially for featured snippets. And lastly, we have a feedback loop that I mentioned. So it's important to remember that this exists, and intent changes over time. Things change over time. So Google are constantly measuring the quality of results based on how people interact with the pages. Now, we know that click-through rate is probably a direct ranking factor as well, but all of these are things that are not directly ranking factors, but they are data that's getting sent back to different parts of that information retrieval system. So the term weighting part gets feedback on whether it's been a good result or not, and just the main ranking processes do. Because if somebody comes to a page and they click on the first result and they stay on that result, they don't just come back and search for something else, that's a good sign. If they spend quite a lot of time on the SERPs and they click show more on the AI overview, they read that, and then they either search for something completely different or they don't do any more searches, then it's probably a good result. Whereas if someone's having to scroll all the way down to the second page to click a result to find something that's relevant to them, that's a sign that maybe it's not the right result, not in the right order. Or if somebody's doing another search which is very similar, but they're having to clarify what they're looking for to try and find the right page, again, that's a sign it's not a good result. So information gets fed back, and constantly these processes are updating. So next time somebody searches for this or something similar, they will know. And like I say, intent changes over time, so that means that Google can reflect as intent changes and also see where it varies by location, context, etc. Okay, that's everything. Thank you very much for listening to me. Like I say, I'll share the slides. I know we've gone through quite a lot in quite a short amount of time, so if there's anything that anybody wants to discuss further, come and find me and talk to me or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.